There are a lot of different killers in Dead by Daylight, and with some of them having extremely low pick rates, it could be hundreds or even thousands of hours before you've played against all of them, and probably even longer until you understand how to deal with each of them. Unfortunately, the game simply does not do a good job at teaching you how to interact with some of the more complex killer powers, but that is where this video comes in. This video is not going to teach you how to loop or how to make insane game-changing plays. It's simply going to teach you how to avoid common mistakes against each killer and tell you the very basic of what you need to know against each of them. For the purpose of this video, killers can be divided into roughly two groups. Those with more complex abilities that put pressure on the whole survivor team and that require specific counterplay, and those with simpler abilities that typically only affect one survivor at a time and don't require super specific counterplay. Most of this video will obviously be focused on the more complex characters, but let's make sure that we understand the survivor fundamentals that are required in order to beat even the simpler killers. At the start of the game, survivors should spread out and ideally occupy as many different generators as possible. This reduces the chances of a killer interrupting many of them and enables them to be as efficient as possible. As you are working on a generator, scout your surroundings and keep an eye for any pallets or windows that could be a source of safety in case you are interrupted. If you do take chase, it's a good idea to run to the safest pallet or window that you see to delay the first hit and try to extend the chase. But keep in mind that the most important thing that you need to do is take the killer away from your generator, your teammates' generators, and ideally the group as a whole. Even if you don't last very long, dying in a corner away from all of the objectives is a great idea, because even if the killer hooks you as quickly as possible, they will still waste a lot of time getting back to their objective. When somebody else gets hooked, it's time for the team to figure out who should go for the rescue. And to do this, you should check the HUD and pay attention to what everyone else is doing. For example, in this scenario, we are very far away from the hook and we are finishing a generator, so we're probably going to wait until we're done with the gen before making a decision. This other person has 2 hook stages, which means that if they get found, they could be killed very quickly and be permanently out of the game. So it's best for them not to get involved and probably play a little bit stealthy. This other survivor, on the other hand, is healthy, is not in chase, and has never been hooked. He's also not doing any generator or healing, so we probably expect him to go for the unhook. However, if we notice that he starts getting chased, then it's probably gonna come down to us to go for the unhook, so we should be prepared for that. As a general rule, survivors that are close to dying need to play a bit more passive and prioritize healing, and survivors that have not been hooked or are not as close to dying should be a bit more aggressive, take chases, do gens in the open, help others, etc. If you follow these basic notions, most killers in the game are relatively easy to deal with, and the ones that have more complex powers, well, let's get into each of them starting right now. When playing against a trapper, your number one priority is to avoid going down nearby basement and take the chase away from areas that he has previously been to, because that's where most of his traps will be set up. Anytime you find yourself doubting whether or not a particular place that you're about to vault is trapped, do not risk it. Instead, if you're healthy, take the hit and use the speed boost to take the chase to a place that you know is safer. Disarming traps is always a good idea, but the first time you do it, or the first time anyone does it, pay attention and see if they become injured. This is an iridescent add-on. If you're out of the injure, it doesn't do anything, and you can even be 99% healed and then disarm traps and then finish quickly with a medkit or self-care. Even if you don't fully disarm a trap, while you hold it, other survivors can go through them. This is a really useful trick. However, in some tight spaces, even if you hold the trap, your teammate cannot go through you. But don't worry, because if they're healthy or if they just got off the hook and they take a hit from the killer, they will lose collision. So in this situation, you actually want to hold the trap and they'll be able to go through you, and then you can stop holding it so that the killer is trapped there. And don't forget that if you free yourself from the killer's grasp, whether it's from decisive strike, a flashlight save, or a pallet stun, you are actually completely immune to traps for a couple seconds, so you can just literally walk right through them. There's nothing he can do. Michael Myers, aka The Shape, is one of the simpler killers in the game, but he does have some things to look out for. For example, some of his add-ons and common perks can make him stronger if he finds the obsession, so if that's you, maybe try not to run into him unnecessarily, as you could be feeding him stacks of play with your food, which will make him faster, or giving him more stock with one of his add-ons. Another thing to look out for is the Tombstone or Tombstone Piece. These add-ons can allow him to instantly murder someone in tier 3, so if you know or suspect that he might have this add-on, don't hesitate. If he's about to pop tier 3, just go into a locker. Sure, he'll be able to grab you out, but he won't be able to tombstone you. Alternatively, if you don't have a locker around, hopping on a generator can achieve a similar result. He can down you or grab you, but he cannot use the instant mori from the tombstone on you. So you can even miss skill checks to make sure that you never leave this gen and hold him here as long as possible. The Doctor is a killer that can induce madness, and when this reaches the maximum level, you will not be able to use items, heal others or yourself, or do generators. It will look like this, but keep in mind, you can still unhook others and even open exit gates, so it's a good thing to get rid of madness, but maybe do the most important things first. Remember that the Doctor has two methods to inflict madness. The first one is his Big Blast that affects everyone in his terror radius. This is a very effective tool to find survivors and flush them out of hiding, but if you see it coming, you could hop into a locker, which makes you immune to it. And the other one is a short distance shock that he can use in chase. This builds up madness a bit slower, but keep in mind that it also makes you unable to do anything for 2.5 seconds. So when playing against a Doctor, you need to be smart and not wait at pallets or do other plays like this, because he will be able to deny them. When playing against Freddy, it's important to pick up clogs as often as possible, but especially right before you go for an unhook. This creates a win-win situation. If the killer is coming for you right away, they'll hit you, but you'll be immune to falling asleep, and his abilities will not work on you for a little while. And if the killer is not immediately coming, you and the person that comes off the hook will both be awake, which means that you can heal him without the killer knowing about it or being able to teleport. Keep in mind that Freddy can teleport to any asleep survivor that is doing actions such as healing or even other things depending on add-ons. You will know that Freddy can teleport to you when you see this little smoke at your feet. So if this happens, only continue to do this if you are okay with him possibly teleporting to you. When playing against the pig, one important thing to remember is that anyone with an active trap cannot go through the exit gates. They will die if they try to do it. If your teammate is in this situation and it doesn't seem likely that they are about to get it off, the best thing you can do is just leave, because they still have a chance to get the hatch, which you can take even with an active trap on you. When playing against the Legion, many matches start with your teammates becoming deep wounded, and if you hear the heartbeat, that means that the killer is detecting you and they're probably coming for you next. You cannot use stealth, you cannot go into lockers, the killer literally knows where you are, so just be ready to take a hit and try to split up away from your teammates as much as possible. If you're noticing that a lot of people are taking hits, do not finish mending in the vicinity. Doing this enables the Legion to detect you again and they can hit you another time, and when the Legion has hit people 4 times, the 5th hit will always be an insta-down. Luckily, there is one easy way to avoid this, and that is to force the Legion to hit the same survivor twice. This disables their power and doesn't let them chain anymore afterwards. The way to do it is very simple. The person that has not been hit yet has to loop around some small obstacle, and then someone that already has deep wound waits for them and then body blocks for them. This will force the killer to either cancel or hit the same survivor twice, and that should be the end of it. You should really not use pallets against Legion while he's using his power, but if you are desperate to stop him because he already has several hits, you could try to stun him, although this is quite risky. A much better way, if you can, is to wait for him to bolt something and then blind him during the animation. This will immediately take him out of his power and he will not be able to chain hits anymore. Since Legion has such an easy time injuring people, it's not extremely important for everyone in the team to be healthy at all times, but making sure that at least one person is healthy is a good idea to make sure that at least one person can go for a hook rescue if necessary. And if you make it to the end game and everyone is alive but one survivor is on hook, remember, don't send all 3 survivors for the rescue. If you do this, the Legion will hit 3 people, then hit a 4th, then someone will go down. Instead, send only 2 survivors and have the 3rd one wait by the exit gates to try to help last minute. The Plague is a killer that has a passive ability to infect survivors. This eventually makes you injured and broken, which means that you cannot heal in any conventional way. At the start of the game, it's almost unavoidable to be infected at some point, and you really shouldn't panic. It's okay to work on generators. As long as you are safe and there's not a lot of pressure on you, you can be injured for quite a bit and it should be okay. Fully infected survivors also spread the infection to anything and anyone that they touch, so do not co-op with a teammate unnecessarily if you can avoid it. You can remove the infection by going to one of several fountains spread across the map and performing a short interaction. Doing this has a certain risk because then the plague can pick up that fountain and she will become more powerful. So you need to be very careful about where you do it. Ideally, you should cleanse next to generators that are already done where no one really needs to be, or by the edge of the map so that if she picks it up, she's really far away from the action. Survivors that are close to dying should prioritize cleansing just to be safe, and those that are in better shape could delay it and maybe stay injured for a little while before having to cleanse. At the end of the game, the killer will not have enough time to capitalize on the fountain, so that's a good time for everyone to cleanse at once. When she's powered up, the Plague's Puke deals damage and is incredibly dangerous. A pallet stun can actually knock her out of her power, but obviously most Plague players are aware of this, and trying it at the wrong time can easily backfire. That being said, if you see the opportunity, go for it. Oh, and if you're in deep wound, you don't need to mend before using the fountain. The fountain will heal your deep wound status effect, but only if you're not about to bleed out, obviously. Another thing that you might occasionally benefit from is over cleansing. If you notice that there's only 1 or 2 white fountains in the map, that means that you've almost used all of them up. If you and your teammates use all of the fountains at once, all of them will be reverted to normal, and even though she will get her power automatically, she will lose a lot of fountains at once, which should make things harder for her. The Twins is a very special killer capable of splitting itself into 2. The general idea to counter them is to take the small one, Victor, as far away from Charlotte as possible. If he misses a pounce attack or hits someone else, he will glow red for a few seconds and you'll have a small window of time where you are able to kick him. If he hits you and you're healthy, he will latch onto you. When this happens, it's very similar to being in Madness Tier 3. You cannot heal or do gens, but you can still unhook or open gates and loop normally. Keep in mind that you also reveal other survivors around you, so ideally you want to take Victor somewhere safe and then remove him. If Charlotte is still chasing you, do not remove Victor. This will give her back her power and also slow you down, which could get you killed. The killer can sometimes leave Victor dormant on the map for a little while, and if you see this, keep in mind that if you get close, he can detect you and your location will be revealed to the killer. If you crouch, however, they cannot detect you and you could even kick him. There are a lot of opportunities to use teamwork against Victor, like body blocking for a vulnerable teammate against a corner. You could even have them go into the locker and then body block the space in front of it so that he cannot open it. Just keep in mind that if you go into a locker by yourself, Victor will grab you and hold you there for a few seconds. If you are very far away from Charlotte though, this can be a great play because you'll be able to exit it before she can catch up. The Twins is a killer that thrives when everyone is injured because Victor can take them out one by one really quickly, so really prioritize having at least some people healed at any given time. When playing against the Cenobite, you and your teammates will have to deal with the box. You can think of the box like a ticking time bomb that will eventually harass everyone in the entire map with chains that makes progressing your objectives pretty much impossible. This will happen when the timer is fully completed or if the killer finds the box or takes it from you. To prevent this, you want to pick up the box and solve it, but I recommend that you don't try to do this at the very start of the game, as you could lead the killer to it, which would be counterproductive. Instead, try to do a gen in the vicinity of the box, and when the killer has already injured someone else and they seem busy, you can go and try to solve it. If at this point the killer teleports to you, that's okay. That also counts as the box being solved and will buy everyone in your team quite a bit of time. Ideally, the box should be picked up by someone that is healthy and won't go down super quickly, and when you try to solve it, don't do it somewhere in the open where you could easily be interrupted by a chain from the killer. Instead, take it to a little corner somewhere a little bit more recluded and you will have an easier time. Luckily for survivors, if you reach the endgame, the box doesn't really stop you from opening gates, so you can always prioritize opening gates and then solve the box afterwards. It's not a big deal if you wait a little. And if you're the last survivor standing and everyone else is either dead or on the hook or on the ground, the box doesn't actually do anything to the final survivor. So in this situation, you can also ignore it. And don't forget that his chains can actually be broken by other survivors, so you can run into them if you need to help a teammate that desperately needs it. The Artist is a ranged killer that summons birds that they can send across the entire map. If you get hit by one of them directly from up close, you'll take damage, but if it hits you through a wall or from very far, you'll be swarmed instead. When you're swarmed, the next bird will always damage you, so you need to get rid of it as quickly as you can. You can hold down the button, which will remove the swarm after a few seconds, and you should always be doing this no matter what, because if you don't hold down the button, the killer sees your location at all times, which will make it very easy for them to get you. If you're hit from afar, the best general idea is to fake going into one direction while the killer still sees you, and then switch to another. This will make guessing where you are very, very difficult. Or if there's a locker nearby, you can quickly hop in and out of it to remove the birds immediately. Just make sure not to do this in chase because it can backfire really badly. Whenever someone gets hooked, it's very common for her to shoot birds at different gens to try to find people, so you should be expecting some birds to come your way. If you pay attention, you'll actually see their flight path, which can make dodging them a little bit easier, and something similar applies when you unhook others. It's always a good idea to step a few meters away from the hook before starting to heal, just in case she shoots some birds back. Unless a certain purple add-on is being used, birds can only hit one survivor at a time. So if you notice someone doing an action that is very important and they're about to get hit by a second bird, you could try to body block them and tank the bird yourself so that they're not interrupted if they take damage. Running into her birds before they are shot is risky because you will be swarmed, but it's something that you can do if she makes a mistake or if you're desperately trying to help a teammate that is in trouble right now. And keep in mind that if a bird flies very close to you but doesn't actually hit you, it still reveals you with killer instinct to the player, and this works even if you are in a locker. The Onryo aka Sadako is quite a sneaky and tricky character to deal with for beginners, but you can mitigate some of her stealth by listening very carefully for this sound. This is her lullaby sound when she's in stealth mode, and it will let you know that she's nearby so that you're not caught off guard. She also has a passive power that allows her to condemn survivors, and the way to avoid it for the most part is to simply look around you when you're doing a generator, and if you see a powered up TB with a white aura, you go and pick up the tape. You should then work on the generator and do what you gotta do, and eventually, when you can, you should go around the map and deliver this tape to the yellow TB, which is the one that you need to put it in. If you notice your condemn getting higher and higher, maybe you should just pick up the tape and deliver it immediately and not do anything in between. And if your condemn is extremely high and about to be full, you should not do any gens, and if the killer is on you, ideally you should go to a corner of the map where there are no generators so that she cannot teleport to TBs. Remember, the condemn only builds when you are next to a TB when she teleports to anywhere in the map. So if you're in a corner like this, yeah, you won't be very useful, but she also can't kill you. Keep in mind that if you are fully condemned, the killer sees your location for a brief moment, and then you can be immediately moried regardless of how many hooks you have. This killer is also tricky because body blocking for your teammates is almost impossible. When she's the manifested, she can go right through you. You can still try to vault windows or drop a pallet and try to vault it to delay it. This can buy time, but it's ultimately really difficult to do. The Dredge has the very scary ability of coming out of any locker in the map. At the start of the game, you'll notice that you're playing against him if you see these special locks attached to the lockers. For the first 10 seconds of the match, it's a good idea to lock them. This will make him much slower when he comes out of that locker in the future. But do keep in mind that after 10 seconds, he will be ready to teleport to any locker, and if he teleports to a locker that you're interacting with in any way, you will be grabbed. So if you want to be safer, check the HUD, and if the killer is busy chasing or carrying someone else, you can lock lockers around the map as you traverse it. When you find a cluster of lockers grouped together like this one, do not lock all of them at once. Otherwise, the killer could teleport and then immediately break the second. If you only lock one, the killer will be forced to come out of that one, and then later you or someone else can lock the second and force him to do it a second time. The Dredge also has the ability to leave a shadow behind that he can teleport to, and this is something that he will use in chase. The best idea when you're being chased like this is almost always to run away, but you can also run into the shadow to make it disappear. This is particularly useful if you're helping a teammate that is very vulnerable and you're desperately trying to help them. After enough people have been injured or hit, you will hear this warning sound that will let you know that nightfall is about to happen. During this time of the game, things become really dark and spooky, and it can be a little bit hard to orient yourself. Just keep in mind that if you are close to lockers, the killer can detect you as he teleports around. So if you're trying to be stealthy, you're the last survivor left, stay away from lockers during this time. The knight overwhelms survivors by summoning guards that help him in chase. If you're being chased by a guard, this by itself is not very threatening. You could run in a straight line until they despawn or run around some obstacle, and you can even grab the banner that they spawn. This becomes available after a few seconds. After you hear the horn and see it light up, you can run into this thing and it will despawn the guard, give you a speed boost, and even an endurance status effect preventing you from going down for a few seconds. Many times you will find yourself being chased by the knight and his guard at the same time. This is not a big deal if they both approach you from the same direction. Just run away from them and the guard will typically despawn very quickly, but good knight players will often force you into a situation where you are being pincer attacked from both sides. And here it's very important that you don't run into the guard. If you run into the guard, you could take a hit and then the killer himself could down you right after. If you run into the killer and he hits you, guess what? This will despawn the guard, so you'll only take one instance of damage. Keep in mind that if you're being chased by a guard, you do not have collision with the killer, so you can go right through them. This sometimes makes it really hard to body block him for altruistic plays, but if you're going for an unhook, don't be afraid. Even if you're being chased by a guard, the guard will disappear the moment you touch the hook, so don't be afraid to help a teammate if you have a guard on you. The Singularity is a very peculiar killer that uses cameras that he sets around the map to infect you. You should try to avoid this because once you become infected by this slipstream, he can use cameras or his own gun to teleport to your location. In this post-teleport mode, he glows green and is overclocked. He basically does everything faster, and holding forward is not an option. He will eventually catch up to you, so you need to use your environment. Using windows is a good idea, and dropping a pallet early can be also decent, even though he'll break it very quickly. Just try not to drop a pallet on top of him, because if you do, he's completely immune to them and the pallet will automatically break. You will waste a pallet and still get hit, so don't try to stun him when he is in his post-teleport phase. The main way to counter this power is by finding EMPs at different stations that spawn around the map. If a station glows yellow, that means it's at its maximum charge, and if you go to it, it will only take a few seconds to get an EMP. If the aura of a station is white, that means that it's not fully charged and you'll need to waste a little bit of extra time printing the EMP. This can still be worth it, especially if you're vulnerable and you don't mind wasting a little bit of extra time just to be safe. These EMPs are special items that you can use in a small area to get rid of his cameras and get rid of the infection on you. If you have infection and come in contact with other survivors, you will actually spread it onto them. So you don't want to do this unnecessarily unless you are about to get rid of it right after. Using the EMPs when someone else is being chased can buy them a lot of time and force the killer to infect them again. And it's also not a bad idea to use it immediately on yourself to prevent the killer from teleporting to you. Just keep in mind that using the item slows you down a little, so don't use it last second when the killer's already on top of you. His biopod cameras also have a debuff that make them very slow when trying to teleport towards someone in the vicinity of a hook. So doing an unhook is actually pretty safe against this killer, even if there are cameras around. When playing against the alien, aka the xenomorph, you will notice that next to each gen, there's typically a station from which you can grab a flamethrower. You can put this maybe next to some loop in the open, and it will make a beeping sound letting you know if the killer is nearby, whether or not they're in a tunnel or undetectable. This is a reliable way to know that they're coming. The aura of these turrets is visible to all survivors across the map, so if you're about to be in a chase, try to take the killer to whatever turrets you see in the distance. This can slow them down and knock them out of their power. The Unknown is a character that damages you in a very special way. First, he weakens you, and then the next hit, once you're weakened, will deal damage. The way you deal with this weakened status effect is by constantly looking at him, and if he goes a few seconds without hitting you again, you will shrug it off. But you might have noticed that he actually has an add-on that will preemptively weaken you if you finish a generator. So, unless you know for sure that this add-on is not in play, do not finish generators as a group, otherwise you will end up with several people being weakened at once. Instead, if you're about to finish a generator with someone else, let go and let them finish it themselves so that only one person is weakened. If this add-on is not in play, you can completely ignore this advice. When playing against the Lich, you will notice that the map spawns special treasure chests that have magical items. It's typically worth it to grab 1 or 2 at some point. If you get the highest possible roll, you get a big special magical item that can be used in a locker to make you invisible or to teleport you to a different space, but this will injure you. Only use it if you know what you're doing. Most of the rolls will give you a random magical item that gives you some kind of buff when the killer is using one of his spells. If you roll the lowest possible number, you will actually summon a Mimic, and if you don't hit some skill checks, you will actually take damage. If someone else has already spawned a Mimic in this chest, you can actually notice the little eyes on it, so do not open chests with eyes, they will always be a Mimic. And if you roll a low number but not the lowest, you will actually get a half depleted, pretty bad item. If this happens, it's very important that you pick up this item and drop it elsewhere, because if there is an item on the chest, it will not reset and you won't have an opportunity to get something else in a few minutes. And finally, not a lot to say about the Houndmaster. Just remember that if a teammate is vulnerable, you can body block and get rid of the dog at the same time, which might be able to buy them some distance. Alright, it's time to talk about the endgames, which against most killers play out the exact same way. If you notice that the final generator is about to be completed and you're now busy doing something else, you could head to the exit gates early and then start opening them right away. It's very important to touch them as soon as possible because this could reveal killer perks that could slow them down, and it's good to get them out of the way. Some people like to leave the exit gates at 99% so that the endgame timer doesn't start too early, but this is almost always a terrible mistake. You should almost always open the exit gates as soon as possible. There are 2 exceptions, however. One is if you see the killer carrying someone. You should always wait until they hook and then open the exit gate to guarantee that the perk Bloodwarden will not trigger and will not trap people in the endgame. And 2 is if you know that the killer is very far away, not really pressuring the exit gates, and you have a group heal to do. In this situation, you could get healed and then heal other people and then open the exit gates, just so that you have a little bit more time for what's going to be probably a series of unhooks. It's completely fine to delay it a little bit in this situation. Any other time, just open it right away. Throughout the game, but especially towards the end, you will notice that killers will become more defensive around hooks as they lose the generators. There's nothing else for them to defend. Sometimes, if you don't have many hook stages on yourself, you could go and trade with a teammate just to buy the team time to heal up and be prepared and do some other maneuver later. But obviously, don't try to do this against killers that can down very quickly or even insta-down. In this situation, you just have to concede the kill most likely. Against the average killer, having 2 healthy survivors is enough to guarantee a rescue. The way it works is very simple. The 2 healthy survivors approach the hook from different angles. One of them goes for the unhook, and the killer will be forced to hit them to interrupt them. Whoever is not hit then goes for the rescue while the killer is in his cooldown recovery. After you pull this off, all the survivors try to run towards the exit gate or at least get closer to it so that if this needs to be done again, you are now capable of escaping. Whenever possible, if you're healthy, you should take hits so that your injured friends can make it out to the exit gates. But even if you're injured, there are still some things that you can do. If a survivor dies very close to the exit gates, you can do what's called a heal tech. Go to the survivor and start healing them right at the edge, and the killer will not be able to pick up. This will force them to eventually hit someone, and during the cooldown, again, both of you can crawl out. This is a very good trick, but it's very easy to mess it up. So if you're the person on the ground, do not hold the sprint button and do not move, or else you cannot be healed. And if you're a survivor next to this person, hold the run button so that no one heals you accidentally instead. It's also very important to remember that certain killers, like the ones shown on screen right now, have the ability to block exit gates momentarily. If one of these killers catches you with their power, the exit gates will not be available for a few seconds, so you need to be a bit more careful when you're in the next gate against them. If you see a teammate being affected by one of these powers, remember, heal teching them can save their life. There's also a variety of killers capable of injuring multiple survivors very consistently around unhooks, so be extremely careful when going against these. And even some of them that can delay you for a few seconds if you're on your own. If you're going for a trade against one of these killers, do not wait until the very last second, or you could be delayed and the person you're trying to help could die. And that's about it for the scope of this video, but don't forget that you have a lot more resources on my website, Otzdarva.com. Here you can find guides on what are the best characters to unlock for both sides, as well as useful builds for advanced and beginner players alike. There will also be more guides like this one on this channel, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss those. Thank you.